A Fox News alert, explosive news from the White House and all over the place tonight. The president has in fact now ordered the DOJ to immediately declassify the redacted sections of the Carter Page FISA applications. He has also ordered the immediate release of the FBI's interview notes with Carter Page. And this is huge news. All Russia-related texts, messages from Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Page, Bruce Orr will also be released, unredacted. Now, this might be the biggest development reported to date. We'll give you the details. It is truly the deep state house of cards collapsing, as I have been predicting, right before our very eyes. Now, Carter Page, Greg Jarrett, Sarah Carter, John Solomon with breaking news, all here with reaction tonight. Also tonight, you were warned right here on this program numerous times how Democrats would try to bork Judge Kavanaugh. Accusations of misconduct, of course, they must be taken seriously, but Democrats, they don't seem to be interested in getting to the truth. All they wanted from the beginning is to delay and ultimately derail Kavanaugh's confirmation. The president is fully standing by his nominee at this hour. And coming up, we will expose the shameful, dirty tactics from the left in America. We also have a bombshell development as it relates to Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. New transcripts from her congressional testimony just released tonight, and Page admitting they saw no proof at all of any Russia collusion. This was 9 months in. It's been a witch hunt and remains a witch hunt. Buckle up. We have a lot of news to cover in tonight's Breaking News opening monologue. All right, for months right here on this program, we have been asking for the unredacted FISA documents to be released. Now the president has done it. Pages 10 through 12, 17 to 34, very specific. All FBI reports of Russia-related interviews with Bruce Orr, all FBI reports of interviews in connection with all of Carter Page's FISA applications will be released to you, the American people. Oh, like a Spartacus moment. Now we're talking about possible exculpatory information, things that they have hidden, and lies that will be revealed. We have new revelations on Christopher Steele and his dirty dossier that Hillary paid for, new information on the deep state's attempt to take down the president both before and destroy him after the election. Now this is huge news. We're expecting these documents anytime. We will update you as they, of course, become available. Also tonight, Catherine Herridge will join us with a full report right out of our monologue. But first, we must address, and we begin tonight, with the Democrats' blatant attempts to derail the Kavanaugh confirmation. Now, the first scheduled votes in the Senate have now been delayed 1 week from tonight. Well, today, actually, the Senate Judiciary Committee will hold an open session. Judge Kavanaugh will be there in order to address what is a 36-year-old sexual misconduct allegation from his teenage years. His accuser has also been invited to testify. No word as to a confirmation if she will be appearing. Now, this comes after Senator Dianne Feinstein, out of the blue, released a cryptic statement last week about an anonymous individual who is now accusing Brett Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct when they were both in high school in like 1982, but we don't know the exact year. That's a charge he categorically denies. Now, keep in mind, Dianne Feinstein, all her fellow Democrats, they have had this information since July. But she didn't ask Judge Kavanaugh about the allegations during any of the private meetings she had with him. She didn't ask the judge about it during any of the public testimony that they had. None, not once. She didn't inform any of her Republican colleagues. She didn't report the incident to authorities until just last week. We're asking the question, why? Now, as it appears to be unfair to all parties involved here, and more unfairly to you, the American people. Now, this was mentioned earlier today by Senator Susan Collins of Maine, questioning why Democrats purposely withheld this information from the public. Is it political? We'll let you decide.
Last week, the Judiciary Committee staff informed me of this letter. I read the letter. At that point, we had no idea who had sent it. And I noticed the date of the letter and wondered why the information had not been released long ago.
It's a great question, and she is correct. Now, the president also weighed in on this earlier today. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Judge Kavanaugh is one of the finest people that I've ever known. He's an outstanding intellect, an outstanding judge, respected by everybody. never had even a little blemish on his record. The FBI has, I think, gone through a process 6 times with him over the years where he went to higher and higher positions. He is somebody very special. As I understand it, Judge Kavanaugh spent quite a bit of time with Senator Feinstein, and it wasn't even brought up at that meeting, and she had this information. So you would have thought certainly that she would have brought it up at the meeting, not wait till everything's finished and then have to start a process all over again. But with all of it being said, we want to go through a full process. I have great confidence in the U.S. Senate and in their procedures and what they're doing, and I think that's probably what they're going to do. They'll go through a process and hear everybody out. I'd like to see a complete process. I'd like everybody to be very happy. Most importantly, I want the American people to be happy because they're getting somebody that is great. I want him to go in at the absolute highest level. And I think to do that, you have to go through this. If it takes a little delay, it'll take a little delay. It shouldn't certainly be very much.
He's talking about transparency. If it takes a little delay, it should take a little delay. But they had it back in July. We've known from the beginning the Democrats' goal from day one, their aim has always been to delay, derail, malign the character of Judge Kavanaugh. That is their history. We saw that on display in the hearings. It was a disaster for the Democrats. You shouldn't be surprised. Senate Democrats have been up and using the same tactics, the same playbook for a long, long time. We'll go back. I reminded you at the time of the announcement that Judge Kavanaugh was picked to replace Anthony Kennedy on the Supreme Court. I reminded you of Democratic Senator from Massachusetts, Chappaquiddick Ted Kennedy. Remember, he's the guy responsible for literally wrecking the confirmation of Judge Robert Bork. And by the way, that's years after he drunkenly wrecked his car, drives it into a river, has a female passenger in the car. He gets up out of the water, and he goes home and doesn't tell a soul. Mary Jo Kopechne died. Still, that guy was impugning the character of somebody else. In this case, it was Judge Bork. Take a look.
Robert Bork's America is a land in which women would be forced into back alley abortions. Blacks would sit at segregated lunch counters. Rogue police could break down citizens' doors in midnight raids, and school children could not be taught about evolution. Writers and artists would be censured at the whim of government.
Fear, smear, and character assassination, a disgusting and gross injustice. And don't forget, when Senate Democrats, they rolled out Judge Clarence Thomas's former colleague, Anita Hill, during his hearings, and she made a late allegation of sexual harassment against him. Now, this character assassination was so vicious and horrible and nasty and unjust, well, Clarence Thomas spoke for himself, even called it a high-tech lynching. Take a look.
This is a circus. It's a national disgrace. And from my standpoint, as a black American, as far as I'm concerned, it is a high-tech lynching for uppity blacks who in any way deign to think for themselves, to do for themselves, to have different ideas. And it is a message that unless you kowtow to an old order, this is what will happen to you. You will be lynched, destroyed, caricatured by a committee of the U.S. Senate rather than hung from a tree.
It became and has been one of our greatest justices. Flash forward to today. More allegations pushed by Democrats, this time nearly 40 years old. And now the once anonymous Kavanaugh accuser has come forward. Her name is Professor Christine Ford. She's a clinical psychology professor in Northern California. She told the Washington Post that in the early 80s, Kavanaugh trapped her in a room as they were teenagers and groped her. This allegedly occurred during a high school party when they were both teenagers, and she was in her swimsuit and other clothes, and he was grabbing her. And Professor Ford's account, I would argue, has to be taken seriously, as the president said. Both Kavanaugh and Ford will rightly have their opportunity to speak under oath, something Judge Kavanaugh has been pushing for. As today, he released a statement, quote, "This is a completely false allegation. I have never done anything like what the accuser describes to her or to anyone, because this never happened. I had no idea who was making this accusation until she identified herself yesterday. I am willing to talk to the Senate Judiciary Committee in any way the committee deems appropriate to refute this false allegation from 36 years ago and defend my integrity. There's also a group of 65 women who knew Kavanaugh at the time back in high school. Well, they're now releasing a letter, and they're backing him up. Now, their letter praised his friendship, his character, and his integrity. And now some of those women are also speaking out. Watch this.
There are plenty of people who testified to him who were from both sides of the fence, you know, whether they were partners in law firms or, you know, other attorneys in other ways that have appeared before Judge Kavanaugh. Just either side, male or female, have just attested to his integrity and how honorable he is in treating everyone.
It's just so polar opposite of the Brett Kavanaugh that I've known for over 35 years. I was confused, surprised, shocked, and I still can't believe it.
I never saw him out of control, drunk. He always retained his composure. He was a responsible guy. He was someone who did have a beer, but he was never out of control. He never became someone different after drinking.
Those are two women that dated Judge Kavanaugh back at that time. Now, tonight, many are rushing to his defense. New developments now are casting serious doubt on the accusations against Judge Kavanaugh. According to Senator Orrin Hatch, Kavanaugh is even denying his presence at the party described by his accuser. Dr. Ford, or Professor Ford herself, is foggy on many important facts about the allegations. She told the Washington Post that, quote, she doesn't remember some of the key details in the incident. She's also not only unclear about the exact date, but the exact year. A man who Ford listed as a witness to the alleged assault that she says was in the room named Mark Judge. He's also flatly rejecting her claims. He told the Weekly Standard, quote, it just is absolutely nuts. I never saw Brett ever act that way. And meanwhile, Professor Ford hired a high-profile attorney. That attorney's name is Deborah Katz. That's a person who's donated tens of thousands of dollars to Democrats, including Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. There's no evidence that this is political, but it is background in the story. According to a townhall.com piece, she trashed Trump and his advisors on social media. She once stood up and defended Senator Al Franken when he was facing misconduct allegations. She repeatedly cast doubt on the credibility of Paula Jones' accusations against Bill Clinton. Exactly what I would say, not exactly a consistent record of supporting victims of sexual misconduct. Now, by the way, based on the history of the Democratic Party, what I'm telling America tonight, we are a nation of laws. We believe in the presumption of innocence in this country. And we also look at facts, and I think the American people should have an opportunity to hear from the 65 women, Judge Kavanaugh. They should be able to hear from the professor, be able to hear from her attorney, be able to hear from people that clerked for Judge Kavanaugh, people that went to law school with him, people that went to high school with him, and then let the American people decide. I believe the American people are fair-minded people. Sadly, it's a serious matter. We welcome testimony from everybody involved. Professor Ford, Judge Kavanaugh, any of the women who have known Judge Kavanaugh during his 36-plus years since. And by the way, that would include the mothers from the girls he had coached on his daughter's team. By the way, his daughters are paying very close attention tonight, sadly, I'm sure. Now, any of the women that worked with him in the White House in the Bush administration. Now, today, ahead of his upcoming hearing, Kavanaugh participated in a conference call with senators, and he responded to the charges. Democrats did not participate. Why not? Don't they want to get both sides? Don't they want to at least hear his side of it? Have they prejudged this case? Do they not believe in the presumption of innocence? Or is it they just care about politics? Is this just another opportunity? We saw what happened to Robert Bork. We saw what happened in the case of Clarence Thomas. Now, let me be very clear here. I don't know. I wasn't there. But I do believe in the presumption of innocence. All Americans should have an open mind. All sides should be heard. But I will say this, it's a preview of what Democrats will do if they take control of Congress in 51 days. We have midterm elections. We know that the left has no plan to make this country better for the forgotten men and women in this country. We've seen their actions in the past. We know what their agenda is, not only obstructing and smearing and slandering the president on a minute-by-minute basis, preventing him, if they could, from doing anything. We also know that they want open borders. We also know that they want to keep Obamacare, and they want their crumbs back, and they don't want constitutionalists, qualified judges with a track record like Judge Kavanaugh on any court, never mind the Supreme Court. We know the Democrats detest the president, his agenda, and even the Americans who support them. Don't take it from me. Listen to what crazy Uncle Joe Biden said over the weekend. This should shock you. This is beyond irredeemable deplorables. This is beyond clinging to God, guns, religion, and Bibles. This is beyond the smelly people that support Trump that I can smell them in Walmart. Listen to crazy Uncle Joe and what he had to say.
Despite losing in the courts and in the court of public opinion, these forces of intolerance remain determined to undermine and roll back the progress you all have made. This time, they, not you, have an ally in the White House. This time, they have an ally. They're a small percentage of the American people, virulent people. Some of them the dregs of society.
Oh, let me get that. If you support Trump, you're the dregs of society. Make no mistakes, Democrats will also end important investigations into the deep state. We're on the verge of breaking it wide open, including the ongoing inquiry into Strzok and Page. And, of course, we have so much new information tonight to uncover. Just today, we learned that Lisa Page testified under oath that the FBI had no evidence linking Trump to Russia collusion before Robert Mueller was ever appointed. In July, she told lawmakers behind closed doors that months and months of serious investigations turned up empty. She said, quote, "It's a reflection of us still not knowing," and it still existed in the scope of possibility that there would be literally nothing. Remember, one day after Mueller was appointed, Strzok texted Page, "You and I both know the odds are nothing. If I thought it was likely, I'd be there, no question. I hesitate in part because of my gut sense and concern there's no big there." But they still appointed, which would explain why they were all leaking, which we have disclosed in recent weeks. This is why Mueller's investigation into so-called collusion has been and remains a total witch hunt. There never was any Russia collusion. Everyone in the DOJ and FBI knew it. Lisa Page testified to that fact. And that's why all the leaking took place, because they were leaking in the hopes they'd get an investigation just to get Trump, the insurance policy. This is why Strzok texted Page, sitting with Bill, watching CNN, a ton more out. "Hey, let me know when you can talk. We're discussing whether now that this is out, we use it as a pretext to go interview some people." A pretext? To use the power of your office to go after people, the FBI? No evidence? They want a special prosecutor, so they leak to get it? And we're going to have a lot of deep state coverage throughout the show. But first, we have new information on the president's decision to declassify a series of important documents. Our own Catherine Herridge has that report tonight. Catherine.
Well, thanks, Sean. There is no official timeline, though a source familiar with the declassification told Fox News they expect the surveillance warrant for Trump campaign aide Carter Page first, as well as the FBI interviews with Justice Department official Bruce Orr. The source said the Justice Department is on a compressed timeline and records could come in days, not weeks. Bruce Orr matters to the Russia case because of his connection to the Trump dossier. After the former British spy behind the dossier was fired by the FBI in November 2016, documents show that the British spy Christopher Steele maintained contact with the FBI and other government officials by using Bruce Orr as a back channel. The release also calls for the unprecedented publicly available records, the text messages related to Russia, clean copies without sections blacked out, from former FBI Director James Comey, his deputy Andrew McCabe, or as well as former FBI agent Peter Strzok and former FBI lawyer Lisa Page. The source said that process may take longer because of the sheer volume of messages. This comes as Fox News confirms new details about the Russia probe's findings. During her July closed-door testimony, a transcript reviewed by Fox News shows that Page said the FBI investigation had not yielded hard evidence of Russian collusion 9 months into the case when special counsel Robert Mueller was appointed in May 2017. Tonight, a Justice Department spokesperson told Fox they are already working on the president's request. The Office for the Director of National Intelligence that oversees the 16 agencies used the word expeditiously. Meantime, the House Intelligence Committee's ranking Democrat, Adam Schiff, called the president's move, quote, an abuse of power, not about transparency, Sean.
All right, Catherine Herridge reporting in Washington. Thank you. Joining us now is South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. Senator, why if the Democratic Party had this in July, why did they hold it? I agree with Senator Collins. I thought she was very very smart in her comment. It's not fair to anybody here.
Right. Well, here's what I would say. If I believed the person in front of me had committed a serious offense that would disqualify them from being on the Supreme Court, I would bring it up to them. I would not let that go unchallenged. So here's what I'm going to do. This is not that complicated. It's a 36-year-old allegation. It's a serious allegation. Everybody needs to be heard, but also people need to defend themselves. I'm going to look at what she said about Brett Kavanaugh in high school and compare that to everything else I know about Brett Kavanaugh, including his denial, and I'll make a decision. And here's what I want your audience to know. If Ms. Ford really did not want to come forward, never intended to come forward, never planned to come forward, why did she pay for a polygraph in August, and why did she hire a lawyer in August if she never intended to do what she's doing?
Nobody else has made that point, Senator. It's a poignant point and an interesting question.
And who paid for it?
Has she agreed to be interviewed or go before the Senate committee?
I don't know.
I'm sorry?
She's welcome to come. We're going to have a hearing Monday. She can come if she likes. If she doesn't want to, she doesn't have to. Kavanaugh can come if he would like. I think he will. We're going to vote on Wednesday. All I can say is that I've been a prosecutor, a judge, and a defense counsel all of my life before I got into politics. This case could not go before a criminal court because it's too old. No lawyer would bring it as a civil suit because it's just too hard to prove. The question for the Senate, is there really enough evidence here, given the nature of the allegation, how old it is, and the uncertain nature of it, to deny this man who's lived an incredible life a promotion to the Supreme Court? And if it was this bad, why did not the Democrats challenge Judge Kavanaugh when he was sitting right there in front of them?
What is your speculation? Well, what's the answer to that? Why didn't they bring it forward? And
I think it's part of a pattern. They can't beat him on the law, so they're trying to destroy his life. If a conservative had edited a tape of a liberal nominee to the court, where you take their words and turn them upside down, they tried to suggest that Judge Kavanaugh used the word or term abortion-inducing drugs when it was the plaintiff, the priest for life. Remember what Kamala Harris did to Judge Kavanaugh? Tried to put words in his mouth. Remember what they tried to say, that he had some knowledge of stolen documents when he did not? So there's been a pattern by Democrats on this committee to take his words out of context, to try to accuse him of things he had nothing to do with. And the last straw here is this allegation that came about last Thursday. And again, why didn't they act on it before?
The president made a decision tonight on unredacting information, FISA, 302s, other information. But we also learned about the FBI, DOJ, other intelligence officials at the highest level leaking information to the media, and Lisa Page saying they didn't have any evidence. Did they leak to get the special counsel like Comey admitted he did?
All I can say, this is the most corrupt thing I've ever seen in my life. If the shoe were on the other foot, if the FBI agent liked Trump and hated Clinton and they got a dossier paid for by the Republican Party, it'd be front page news everywhere. I'm glad the president let this information out to the public to show how corrupt it was. As to Kavanaugh, he's going to get his day in court, as well as Ms. Ford, and I'm going to look at everything in Judge Kavanaugh's life, not just this one accusation.
You and I agree.
I feel good about it.
Let everybody testify. Everybody that he's known all throughout his career. And let the professor testify and let the judge testify. I think the American people are fair. Thank you, Senator. When we come back, Sarah Carter, Greg Jarrett, John Solomon. Important breaking news on the deep state next. Right here now with reaction, tonight's explosive breaking news. The author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, The Russian Hoax, the illicit scheme to clear Hillary Clinton, frame Donald Trump, Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett, Fox News investigative reporter and contributor Sarah Carter, The Hill's John Solomon. John, we'll start with you. You broke the story. Lisa Page, how revealing, especially now that we look at the media leak strategy and the timeline of all this, what she said to Congress.
What you really end up seeing with these text messages and the rest of the body of evidence that's now come forward is that these FBI agents, this Justice Department, allowed themselves to become part of a political attack machine. Instead of being neutral, following the evidence, they impose the presumption of guilt in the absence of evidence. And it's a terrible corrupting of what's supposed to be a very neutral counterintelligence process. They knew when Mueller was being appointed There was no evidence yet, and instead the Justice Department embarked on a leaking strategy to try to create the perception that there was guilt and a reason to continue with this investigation. I think it's shameful.
No evidence, Sarah, for 9 long months. And just like Comey, it's very similar. This is the upper echelon. They have a media leak strategy. The purpose was to what? Literally set up so that a special counsel will be put in place so they maybe can get Trump. Is this the insurance policy? Because it's all the same players.
It's all the same players, Sean, and it was also a pretext. I mean, think about this. They leak information to the media out of an unverified dossier and other information that had not been verified, and then they use that information to then expand their own investigation without ever saying anything to the courts. I think what we're going to find in these declassified documents, and I don't think it's going to take long for the president to get his hands on these and for Congress to get their hands on these, I think what we're going to find is extraordinary exculpatory evidence that should have been handed over to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court.
In other words, in the 302s we're going to find this?
That's right. I think we're not just in the 302, Sean, but in all of the other evidence and documents. Remember, not just the FISA application. We're going to see the truth there. We're going to find out what Bruce Orr told the FBI. And we're also going to get all the notes that were part of the Gang of Eight documents. These are all important, and they're all going to reveal that this exculpatory evidence that should have been turned over to the courts. And let me tell you this, according to the sources that I've spoken with that know what's in there, would say that once that goes public, you're going to see that the courts were lied to, that this was the biggest abuse of power in modern political history and the biggest abuse of power against the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court.
The illicit scheme to clear Hillary Clinton and frame Donald Trump. That's a book that is #1 on the New York Times. You wrote it. Is this it?
This is it. Every day seems to bring new evidence that proves the thesis of my book, that this was an illicit scheme. The FBI and the Department of Justice knew there was no evidence of collusion. They violated the law when they launched their investigation in July of 2016. And now we find out today through the text message that when the special counsel was appointed, they didn't have any evidence of collusion.
For 9 months.
You are supposed to specifically
And that's why they leaked in the lead up. They leaked it purposefully to get the impression that there was all this evidence
to damage Trump and as a pretext to begin questioning people. They thought it would snowball and that this would undo the Trump presidency. So many crimes have been committed here, not only deceiving the FISA court judges by concealing evidence, but then here we find out through these text messages, they are leaking highly classified information. That is a violation of the law, several different statutes.
What do you think? What are your sources saying, John, that we're going to see when when the unredactions take place, the declassification obviously taking place now?
I suspect we're going to find out that the FBI's monitoring and intrusion on the campaign and the political process and the transition in the early president was much more intrusive than has been acknowledged publicly. Maybe not wiretapping, but other surveillance techniques. And I think we're going to be surprised by the amount, like Sarah said. I think Sarah has it on the money. My sources are saying exactly the same thing. A lot of exculpatory information, a lot of derogatory information about the credibility of the witnesses they were using before the court that the court did not know about. And this is an honor system. Remember, there's no advocate for the accused.
That's a fraud on the court, isn't it, John?
It's a fraud on the court.
And it's a fraud to spy on a campaign and an election and post-election. It seems like all the leaking before, all the leaking after President Trump was elected was all designed to destroy the president. Sarah, is that your belief that the American people will see it clearly?
The American people will see it clearly. And Sean, this was a fraud on an American citizen, on Carter Page.
He's going to join us tonight. Yes.
Yeah, imagine if this happened to other American citizens. Now we don't know how far the abuse has gone. Was this just about Carter Page, or are there going to be other cases that we don't know about where they went beyond and violated the law? I mean, this is Up to 10 years for leaking classified information is what people could serve in prison time if they're charged.
To our lawyer, who are the people that you think, if there's justice, equal justice under the law, equal application of our laws, who gets indicted in this?
Anybody who signed on the FICE application because they didn't have the evidence and they never verified it, and every renewal is supposed to have new evidence they didn't have it, and the leaking of this information classified to the media. Yeah, 10 years. So, I mean, this is, Sean, the arrogance of power. It becomes addictive and intoxicating. Trump was a threat to their power, so they sought to bring him down.
Scary that this could happen in the United States of America. Sarah, you used my words earlier. They came out of your mouth. The biggest abuse of power scandal in American history, and it's unfolding. All three of you have played a big part in it. You'll never get the Pulitzers you deserve, but truth matters. Thank you all. When we come back, President Trump's attorney, Jay Sekulow, he'll be here with reaction on all today's breaking news. Ed Henry, live report tonight from our nation's capital. Busy news night. Glad you're with us. A week from today, the Senate Judiciary Committee will have another open hearing with Judge Brett Kavanaugh, and also Professor Ford has been invited to testify as well. Joining us live in Washington with more is our chief national correspondent, Ed Henry, tonight. Ed, big news today.
That's right, Sean. Breaking tonight, Judge Kavanaugh as well as Professor Ford have both been invited to testify in public next Monday by the Senate Judiciary Committee. What's interesting, the White House is saying tonight Kavanaugh will testify tomorrow if they want, because he is so eager to deny the allegation and clear his name. His accuser, Dr. Ford, has alleged that at a party in Maryland back in the 80s, he pinned her to a bed, groped her through her clothes, and when she tried to scream, he put his hand over her mouth, and that after his friend, Mark Judge, jumped on the bed, all three tumbled, and she ran away. But that friend has called the story nuts, says he never saw Kavanaugh act that way, and has no recollection of this ever happening. And after a phone call with Kavanaugh today, Republican Orrin Hatch's office said, quote, he told Senator Hatch he was not at a party like the one she describes, and that Dr. Ford, who acknowledged to the Washington Post over the weekend that she did not remember some key details about the incident, may be mistaking him for someone else. That's Kavanaugh's version as told to Republican Orrin Hatch. Now remember, Democrat Dianne Feinstein has known about an anonymous allegation along these lines since July and had not said anything until late last week, something President Trump jumped on today.
He's an outstanding intellect, an outstanding judge, respected by everybody. Never had even a little blemish on his record. The FBI has, I think, gone through a process 6 times with him over the years where he went to higher and higher positions. Judge Kavanaugh spent quite a bit of time with Senator Feinstein, and it wasn't even brought up at that meeting, and she had this information.
Now, a key Republican swing vote on all of this, Susan Collins said she's also wondering why the original anonymous letter from Dr. Ford was not dealt with sooner. But she and other Republicans like Jeff Flake, Bob Corker say they want a thorough investigation of facts before they'll move forward on this process, Sean.
All right, Ed Henry in Washington here now with reaction is President Trump's attorney, Jay Sekulow. Full disclosure, he has done work for me, legal work in the past. So I think Lindsey Graham actually had the right approach. I think the president had the right approach. All right, if there's going to be a slight delay, I want everybody to be certain. The American people have a right to understand. The person that Professor Ford describes in the room has denied it. Then we have law clerks. Then we have 65 people that knew him at the time. Then we have other students in high school and in college and in law school and law clerks and people that worked with him in the Bush administration. And all the time he has been a judge, there's not one other person that only says glowing things about him, including his former girlfriends at the time.
Well, look, Sean, I mean, Judge Kavanaugh has stated that he will testify before the Senate. He said he would be willing to do it tomorrow. Dr. Ford has been offered the opportunity to appear as well. I think what Lindsey Graham said says it all. You evaluate the situation, and there'll be a vote. And look, I mean, no one can question whether Judge Kavanaugh has the intellect to serve on the Supreme Court of the United States. And if you're looking at judicial philosophy, he has over 300 published opinions. So I think from that standpoint, but you've got to look at this. Look, in this day and time, and I understand this, an allegation's been made. Judge Kavanaugh is going to respond. That's the appropriate way. The accuser is going to have her time as well, and it should be an orderly and appropriate process. I think what the president said is right. I think what Senator Graham has said is correct.
But I think when you look at the history, this is why I think Americans, I believe in the presumption of innocence. I want everybody to testify, including Professor Ford. But if you look at the history of Robert Bork and then Clarence Thomas, I think it gives people more reason to pause. And I don't think nobody was there. Nobody knows. What if it's only resolved that this woman makes this allegation, the person that was supposedly also in the room says no, the judge says no, there's nothing else in his career that marks a blemish on his character. He was a perfect gentleman is the words that so many people use that even dated him. Yep. What then happens?
That's why the Constitution, Sean, that's why the Constitution has this process. The president nominates, and it's with the advice and consent of the Senate that a nominee is confirmed or not confirmed to the position. So what Senator Graham said and what Senator Grassley has stated is they're going to go through a process pursuant to the Constitution. That's the appropriate way to respond to this. Let
me ask you about the declassification and redactions. Yes. Some have said that might be a long process. Others have said it could be done fairly expeditiously. Thoughts?
Well, look, the president issued an order. The president has that authority under Article 2. He exercised it. He has the authority, and he exercised that authority. And now the question is that you're asking the length of time for the process where it'll come out unredacted. That's intergovernmental. The government works on that. I would assume it's going to move expeditiously. But I think what's most important here is the American people are going to have a look, finally, at what actually was the beginning. What was it that started this inquiry in the first place? And if John Solomon and Sarah Carter are correct in their reporting, and that the information is going to show some type of potential surveillance inside the Trump campaign, this would be an eye-opener. This would be shocking. This would create a situation where you have to look at the legitimacy of the beginning of the inquiry. I mean, we all focus on the fact that the inquiry, it looks like started with the Christopher Steele dossier.
Testified, as we now know, that they had nothing.
She said after 9 months, nothing.
And
Sean, that's 2 years
now. There was a media
right?
leak strategy in the lead up to the appointment of the special counsel.
Right. And that, by the way, the media leak strategy in and of itself can be a violation of the law. So there is a host of problems from the top to bottom on this. I've said that for a year and a half on this broadcast. But you do have to point out that this inquiry started well before the appointment of the Office of Special Counsel, before Bob Mueller's appointment. And Lisa Page testified under oath that there was no evidence of any collusion. And let me take it a step further here, Sean. Peter Strzok, in those messages back and forth, said there was no there, and that's why he was reluctant to go over initially to the special counsel's office.
And interesting, Bob Woodward said he looked hard. He found nothing. Yeah. Senator Burr said they found nothing in the Senate committee. None of that ever gets reported, and it has been a nonstop, never-ending.
The thing speaks for itself. That's what we say in the law. Yeah. The thing speaks for itself. The evidence is clear.
All right, Jay Sekulow, thank you for being with us. When we come back, the man at the middle of all this, Carter Page, weighs in on the president declassifying the FISA documents, sending them out unredacted. A lot of it has to do with him and attorney. David Schoen, next, straight ahead. Right here with more reaction to tonight's breaking news. Civil rights and criminal defense attorney David Schoen, former Trump campaign associate Carter Page. Carter, apparently a lot of this has to do with you and how perhaps exculpatory evidence was withheld. But really, we know that FISA applications were all based, we're told, by the Grassley-Graham memo and by the Nunes memo. Bulk of information came from Hillary's bought and paid for, phony, debunked Russian dossier. You're at the center of this because they were spying on you. By the way, why have you never been indicted if you're such a horrible person that needed a year's worth of surveillance?
Sean, not only have I never been indicted, I've never been asked any question, which was a credible question, as to anything I might have even possibly done wrong. So it's just so incredibly stupid to begin with that where do you even begin to start unraveling this? So we're starting to see this come out a little bit. Yeah.
And this gets to the nature of what you plan to do. I mean, I know Ray Donovan famously once said, where do I go to get my good name back? Where do you go to get your good name back, and what are your plans legally?
Sean, you know, the bigger question to me is fixing the disaster that this created for our democratic processes in the United States. You know, I'm down in Washington for a couple of days talking to a number of people about potential legal strategies to work on that. My biggest concern is all the damage that this did to the U.S. government, you know, the mockery it made out of the Constitution, and, you know, all of the wrongdoing that was done by various officials within Department of Justice, the FBI, and DNC. Yeah.
How did a Hillary Clinton, David, bought and paid for, unverified, uncorroborated Russian dossier become the foundational materials or bulk of information to get a FISA warrant? How did they withhold that information to the judge? Doesn't that mean they committed a fraud on the judge and on the FISA courts? Never mind that the evidence was overwhelming in the beginning and they fixed an investigation into Hillary Clinton and they tried to go after that guy right in the middle of our screen here.
Absolutely. Any material omission or withholding of information from the FISA court violated that court's rules and the constitutional rights of the subject of it. I think now we're headed toward the first step in righting these wrongs to the American people. Declassification is key. And let's be very clear, because it's shameful that we're hearing protestations from members of Congress about the declassification. Every American should demand full transparency. That's what the president is providing, and this is his Spartacus moment, to use another reference. Listen, the president has full authority under Article 2, Section 2, but more than that, President Obama in 2009-2010 signed Executive Order 13526 that again affirmed that the president has full authority as the final arbiter of what's classified and what's declassified. More than that, the FISA court itself has Rule 62 that puts that into effect, and the FISA court presiding judge specifically wrote to two members of Congress earlier this year saying the court has no objection to the disclosure of these documents. It's for the executive branch to decide, because the executive branch has an interest that the court recognizes in maintaining the integrity of ongoing law enforcement investigations. That's the court's words.
I would like to hear from the judges in this case, Carter Page. Considering it's about you, I would assume you'd want to hear from them.
I would love to. I actually sent a letter to the chief judge of the FISA court, and, you know, I never got a response. What's even worse is that when the FBI declassified things, they sent it to the New York Times first, which is in violation of the Privacy Act. You know, they're supposed to, if documents are about yourself, you know, they should be, the individual who it's about should see it before the, you know, it's published to the entire world. Exactly.
Last word, Mr. Show.
Listen, declassification is absolutely the right move now. The president is serving the American people in the role for which he was elected. When he was elected, the American people gave him this power to declassify and determine what should be classified. Yeah. He's operating in the interest of full transparency. That's what every American should demand.
It's interesting. The only people freaking out tonight are people like Shifty Schiff, Adam Schiff, the 400, Carter's listening. You know why? Because he's going to be proven a liar. That's my prediction tonight. Thank you all for being with us. Carter, we'll have you back when this is redacted and released, unredacted and released. Ollie North, NRA, out with a new ad about people who kneel for the anthem. That's next.